Hello, and welcome to How Resilient Managers Can Create Resilient Teams. I am Meri McCoy-Thompson, and I'm the Executive Director of Dovetail Learning, and I am delighted to have you all with us today. Our mission at Dovetail Learning is to strengthen resilience in adults and children, and our vision is a world of kind, connected human beings. And all of our materials are open educational resources, which means you can download them and use them for free, adapt them for use in your community. All we ask is that you give attribution and then you collaborate and share back materials that you create with our materials and use the same Creative Commons license. A little bit about me. This is how the cultural patterns in which I see the world. I am a white woman from Irish American background. I have two adult children, one who got married a year ago and another who will be getting married in December. I have lived and worked for organizations all over the world, and I have spent much of the last 10 years taking care of my mom and stepfather who had Alzheimer's, and I have a cat. And just before we begin, I just want you to take one moment to think about how you're feeling today. It's your state of being versus Nicolas Cage. Are you happy, carefree, or maybe angry, or kind of just blah, maybe stressed, maybe feeling like you need to attack the bees? We know this is one of our resilient skills, how we notice ourselves. We just think it's important to just check in with ourselves, even if it's 15 seconds. What is our agenda today? We're going to be focusing on how I can be a resilient manager. First, what is resilience? Then, most importantly, what can get in our way? Our reactive resilience and our cultural resilience can both help us and harm us. We'll talk about that. And then we're going to talk about how we can create resilient teams using resilient mindsets and look at two specific connecting and collaborating skills that can help us with that journey. So just a little bit about what challenges do we face as managers? And feel free to put any ideas you have in the chat. If you have other things you want to add to it, fabulous, right? We know that there's a changing marketplace always in all of the industries we work in, and we often need to pivot quickly. We really discovered that, of course, in 2020, but it's always true for us and can create a lot of challenges as managers. We also know we battle underperformance by employees, right? Whether that's unclear expectations, whether they're not motivated, there's conflicts, maybe they don't know how to have teamwork, maybe they just don't know how to do the job. But all of that can be really challenging as a manager. And just we have financial and time challenges. We have to get a workload done that may be unrealistic, and we have a budget that may not work. Yeah, meeting all communication styles across the organization. Absolutely. Communication is critical as a manager, and trying to do that with all sorts of different types of people who have different expectations can be really challenging. So many things. Thank you for adding yours to the chat. Feel free to add questions or comments as you go along. We try to make that interactive. Obviously, with a lot of you on the call, it's hard to do that, but as much as you can, I'd love to hear from you. So let's think about how I can be a resilient manager. And I will say, I'm going to go through the material very quickly, but there's a recording for this and you'll be able to access it. And we'll also send you a PDF of the slides. So just in case you're like, I can't get it all. So the most important thing is that we have to start within ourselves. As resilient managers, believe it or not, the hardest part is actually helping our own transformation into being resilient. And I will acknowledge that we have both this rational mind and this intuitive, holistic body emotions that send us signals. Sometimes we think the rational mind is in charge. A lot of times, because we're kind of trained through our life to really be logical and think about things. But the reality is really getting in touch with our intuitive and holistic body emotions. That's how we become more resilient. They actually doing a lot more driving than the little guy at the top of the elephant. So just wanted to acknowledge that, right? What is resilience? Let's think about that for a moment. Resilience is a simple definition, the ability to adapt and respond to meet challenges effectively. I want to acknowledge our resilience will be higher or lower in different situations. Even if we're practicing this We Are Resilient approach, there is a lot that's always coming at us. We can feel like we're strong, and then we get that email or that phone call. Somebody walks into our office, something happens, and we're like, ugh, and just plummets, right? That's normal. That's normal. And we're never going to eliminate that entirely. Our goal is to maybe plummet a little bit less, maybe be able to ride that roller coaster a little bit easier, because we know our resilience can be strengthened through the practice of our skills. Super important concept there. Our resilience is an ordinary superpower. It does not come from rare and special qualities, but from the everyday magic of being human. We are all resilient, which is why we named our approach We Are Resilient, to acknowledge what we already have, all the work you're already doing, the amazing work you're already doing, and how you're able to be here. I also want to acknowledge that resilience is the awareness, the mindset, and skills to create the best version of ourselves so we can contribute to our family, our school, workplace, our community, and the world. This is why we're so passionate about this approach, because we know with all of this knowledge, we can become more resilient. Resilience can help us in so many ways. It can help us feel more calmly, listen more deeply, navigate stress, trust ourselves, feel grounded, empathize. All of these things help us contribute to our workplace better and help us with our employees and our team members. All of these things can make us the manager that we want to be. And when we can pass these skills on to our employees, our team members, they can also flourish. They can meet their needs to have confidence and contribute it more effectively, collaborate more effectively. This is why we feel so passionate about it. Before we dive more into what we want to do, let's think about what's getting in the way of our resilience, because that is really fundamental and not a lot of people spend enough time in that. So let's think a minute for our stress trigger reaction, right? So we're going along and then we get that email that says, oh, we have to tighten our budget. Stress event. Our protective patterns come up. We might have a peak and it can take a long time to calm down. We feel depleted afterwards. We might feel so many different ways. We call this losing our cool, and it's set off by our protective patterns, right? Our protective patterns are helpful. They're how we react to the world when we enter a stress event. They give us our reactive resilience, and they may not be our most helpful approach. So one important part of this is to notice our protective patterns and see what's being helpful or not. Our protective patterns are what emerge when we feel unsafe, physically, emotionally, socially, mentally, economically, so many things. Think for just a second. How do you respond to stressors? When you get that phone call, when you get that email that's, oh, some conflict is brewing, some budget's happening, your product line's been discontinued, so many things. How do you respond to that stressor? Think for just a moment about that. Now let's look to see what we've identified. We've identified 6 types of protective patterns that give us our reactive resilience. They can help us in certain situations and they can harm us. All of these things are also true for our team members. They also all have these protective patterns. Most of us have a go-to. For myself, my go-to might be avoiding. When I was caring for my mother with Alzheimer's, these texts would come about all the care that she needed and I just would avoid it. I would put my phone away. I can't deal with it, right? Sometimes it's attacking. Somebody comes to me with bad news. I'm like, what? How could that be true? And it just comes out. It's just the way I'm built. That's my reactive resilience, my go-to strategy. It's really important to see how it can be helpful and how it can be harmful. Let's look at these more in depth. So our distrusting protective pattern, that one is, do I doubt myself or others? For example, we might have a team member who won't share information. They're distrusting, right? They feel like they need to hold on to it. Maybe we have a team member who takes too long on projects. Now, if we can look at how that can help us, it could maybe help us because we know who to go to for that information, or we know, like, if we need a project that we really want done well, we'll give it to that team member. But of course, it can also be harmful because maybe that team member is holding other people up, right? So it's important to see, oh, okay, they're using their protective pattern. How can we work with that? How can we work with it? Maybe I'm the one that's doing that. Hypervigilance is another protective pattern. That's when we're constant high alert. What problem's going to happen next? There's going to be something, right? How do we identify it? Maybe it's a team member who always sees the threats or the risks. They always say, no, we can't do that. No, right? Well, that can be helpful sometimes to have the contrary voice in the room. Maybe it's helpful to have a hypervigilant when we're trying to figure out whether we should do a project. And of course, it can wear us out. If we're hypervigilant, we can get worn out by always feeling a threat. And if we have other people who are hypervigilant, it can be wearing out to hear them say no all the time, right? So just being aware of these is the first step, and is thinking about, is it helping or not helping? Hyper caretaking, that's, do I over prioritize at my own expense? Maybe it's the team member who takes on all the extra work. Maybe it's the team member who organizes the social events. They can be helpful, but then maybe that team member always gets burned down and doesn't get the work that they need to be done. And that's when it's harmful, right? What about avoiding? That's if we're withdrawing or retreating, maybe physically, emotionally, maybe we just don't. Procrastinate is a big way to avoiding in our workplace. Maybe it's the team member who fails to respond to emails or calls. Maybe they just disappear, right? How can that be helpful? Because you can see the harm. They're not getting the work done. They're not part of the communication stream. But maybe it's good to know, well, they're going to walk away if there's volatile situations. There's sometimes we need to avoid something as we kind of regroup and figure out how to handle it. So it's just good to know harmful, helpful. Defending, another one. Do I act or sound like others are constantly judging or criticizing me, right? Okay, how does that feel? You might have a team member who is always like standing up for themselves, right? So it can be helpful because you know that they're not going to be pushed around, but it can be harmful because it can kind of get into a thing, especially if you have another team member who's attacking, right? So am I quick to be on the offensive, right? That's what attacking is. And like I said, I do that. You come at me with an idea that I disagree with, and I can just come back. And it's helpful for me to say, is that really helping? Maybe attacking is not what's needed. So these protective patterns come for all of us. They come out in different situations. We might use different ones at work, different ones at family. I find I use different ones with my mother-in-law than I do with my husband or my kids, right? But being aware of these, whether we're distrusting, hypervigilant, hyper caretaking, avoiding, or defending or attacking, understanding how these patterns are working is really important. And we have more information on this on our website if you're interested, both in documents and more webinars. So just a high level on what those protective patterns are. The other pattern that is really important for us to think about is our cultural patterns, and that's how we view the world. Now, it gives us cultural resilience, which can be super helpful, but it can also be harmful if we don't understand how it's working. Our cultural patterns are unique to us. They're integral to our identity. They're made up of everything from family stories, community norms, our religious traditions, socioeconomic status, the construct of disability, political affiliation, ethnicity, language, racial construct, gender identity or sexual orientation, family stories, our worldview. Some of us think, well, we can't bring any of that into the workplace. We're just here to get the work done. None of that should matter. Just the merit of how. But the reality is we're whole people, and we bring these views into the world, even if they're hidden, even if we don't talk about it. They're how we see the world, and we respond to the work and the people around us and what should be happening in relationship to our cultural patterns, right? So as I said, they're messages about how to act or not act. Our beliefs, our attitudes, behavior, they're information that's passed down in families and communities, and they inform our identity. They inform everything such as, is it important to be prompt or not? What kind of clothing is appropriate? How should I have my hair styled? How much personal space should I give in an office setting? Somebody mentioned the communication style. Do we have an ask communication style? Well, anything is possible if I just ask for it. Or do we have a communication style where don't ask? You should know in advance. You can kind of guess at what someone's going to say. And then you can ask only when you're going to get a yes. Perfectly valid communication styles, but people have different ones, right? And so understanding that our cultural patterns form those communication styles is really important. How much information we share, whether we're friendly or not, all of this comes down to our cultural patterns and of course our personality and how we were raised, right? Whether we really aspire to a top-down management style or shared management style and decision making, that's our worldview about what we think we should do or shouldn't do. Again, messages about how to act or not act. And understanding that it's our cultural patterns that are influencing us or other people's cultural patterns that are influencing us is very important as we try to figure out our resilience and what could be getting in the way, right? As I said, our cultural patterns can give us our core values. They provide shortcuts to understand and navigate the world. They help us feel like we belong to a group of people with whom we feel safe. But they can also harm us, right? They prevent us from seeing others' truth. How can that person communicate that way? Why is that person always 5 minutes late? Why can't they understand to be at a meeting on time? Our judgments limit our ability to engage with others, right? Because we're always stuck like we don't understand these people with the different cultural patterns. We don't understand people with different protective patterns. It's hard for us to figure it out. It's great to focus on our cultural resilience, and that's our ability to acknowledge and understand our own beliefs. Oh, that's a belief that I have, and maybe I need to communicate about that. Maybe we need to have a conversation about this cultural patterns. Maybe we're going to agree to disagree, but at least we can understand, oh, that's how they are. They were raised with that belief, value, norm, or social practice. When we bring in curiosity and humility and understand the multiplicity of experience of others, it helps us navigate the workplace. It helps strengthen our relationship and the relationship of our team members. Strong cultural resilience also can limit the perpetuation of bias, discrimination, and racism, which by definition is going to harm the resilience of your team and your ability to perform in the workplace. Through all of this, it's really important to understand every human being has impeccable reasons for behaving exactly as they are and for being exactly who they are. So knowing that we have these resilient mindsets, knowing that we have these cultural patterns and these protective patterns, and they can help and harm, and okay, that's all useful, but what am I going to do with that? How can I create resilient teams, right? Now I just know about the patterns that can be getting in the way. Well, we can use our resilient mindsets and skills to navigate all these tricky things, right? There's a lot of tricky things I just talked about. The resilient mindsets of curiosity, choice, and courage. Super important, right? How am I being and what don't I know? That's the resilient mindset of curiosity. Choice. What empowering choice can I make in this situation? And courage. What kind of person do I want to be? So the resilient mindset of curiosity. What don't I know about this? So often, you might have a team member who has done something, you think, how could they do that crazy thing? And you want to come and you want to tear them apart like they've ruined. Maybe they got mad at a client. What don't I know about this, right? So you bring the person in, and if you ask them, can you ask a clarifying question? Can you talk to me about what happened there and what that was like? You might learn some really important information that gives you context for the whole situation that completely changes your interaction, and it changes the person's ability to interact with you, right? Simple curiosity, one of the most important things we can have as managers. Also about ourselves. How am I being? Maybe we didn't understand that the way we were being to the other person felt like we were attacking them, or maybe to the other person felt like we were demeaning them, or not empowering them in the way that they can be. Maybe the way that we thought was help was actually really not contributing to the situation. So stepping back, is my protective pattern involved? Is my cultural pattern involved? How can we have a better conversation? And for others, help me understand. May I ask a clarifying question? Simple things. Putting on a resilient mindset of curiosity can change so much. It opens us up to new possibilities and prepares us for the centering, connecting, and collaborating that we need to have a resilient team, right? The second resilient mindset is choice. Understanding we always have a choice. Even in the most deepest, darkest situations, we always have a choice, and that's how we respond to a situation, right? The greatest human discovery is that by changing the inner aspects of our minds, we change the outer aspects of our life. So fundamental for how we manage teams. To understanding we have choice, we have to think between stimulus and response. There's a space. In that space is our power to choose our response, and in that response lies our growth and our freedom. So we have that space in between the stressors and the impact of stress, in between when we get the news, or maybe something, our team member does something. We have a little space in which we can pause, think, okay, how am I going to handle this before we just jump in? Really important, especially for people like me who just love to jump in. I have ideas. Taking that space in between, understanding I have a choice in how I react and how I respond to whatever's coming. So back to the stress reaction that we talked about in the beginning. If we have a curiosity about it, what the heck happened? How did I have that reaction? We can help manage our stress curve, right? We notice our protective pattern. Oh, that wasn't helpful. And we wonder and assess, oh, maybe if I responded to my team member in this way, I would have a different situation. We have a choice in our resilience skills. Doesn't mean our protective patterns are not always helpful. That's why they're named protective patterns. Sometimes they help. But understanding our body's stress response is triggered more by our perceived stress than their actual event makes a huge difference. And it can also make a difference in how we respond to our team members and how the team members respond to each other. When all of your team members understand their protective patterns and cultural patterns, they can have better communication with each other. The last resilient mindset is a resilient mindset of courage. That's really helping us lean into the values. It's hard to do this stuff. It's hard to think about all these things that are happening when we're trying to get our workload done, but understanding what our values are most important, what the kind of manager we want to be can help us do the hard work. The resilient mindset of courage involves feeling what my heart is telling me. What is my heart really telling me in this situation? Listening to that inner wisdom and taking action in ways that honor my values and boundaries. What kind of person do I want to be, and how can I do that? Then we can anticipate, oh wow, I have a round of layoffs I have to do. That is going to be hard. I'm going to choose some resilience skills before I go into that stress resent. And I'm going to think about some breathing mindfully, some of the other skills that we have, so that when we are dealing with people's real lives and the really hard things that we have to do and they have to do, we can do it from the most centered place possible. Our skills for resilience. So we've talked about the mindsets. Now we have all these skills that we can use. We do not have time to go into all of them. Like I said, we have a website and books and resources and lots of things that can give you more information. So I'm just going to give you a highlight of 2. I will also say I've been going really fast. If you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A or type them into the chat and we can talk about them along the way, right? I'd love to handle your questions, but a high level, what are the skills for resilience? So personal resilience is strength in using our centering skills. Personal resilience is the resilience that I have and I feel in most situations. So to be the most resilient manager possible, or it applies in our personal life, of course, too, it's using our centering skills, right? These are the 6 centering skills that we have talked about. Noticing myself. We did that a little bit right at the top of our webinar. What am I feeling right now? Understanding what I'm feeling. I'm feeling excited because I love to talk to you, but understanding what we're feeling, that is noticing myself, and maybe telling people about it. Sometimes I have to go into meetings, like I did this morning. My resilience is at 20%. Team, you should know that, right? So then they understand what my reactions are, because I spend some time noticing myself. I share that with people, and then people handle my reactions a little bit differently, right? Breathing mindfully, that's when we take some deep breaths. Breathe deeply, feel it completely. It's amazing. Our body is hardwired, biochemically hardwired to, when we breathe mindfully, we activate our vagus nerve and our mind calms and our heart calms, and we can be more centered in the place we want to be. Letting go in a way that we need to. Finding gratitude, right? All of these things that you've probably heard about and are aware of, there's science behind all of these skills, but we just focus on being intentional on them because that can help us be the resilient manager that we want to be. And helping our teams do that can help them pivot and with all the things that they're trying to do and with each other, right? So practicing these skills together can be amazingly powerful. We've worked with a lot of teams that have done that. Another set of skills are the connecting skills that give us the relational resilience, and that is how we are with each other. We know that relationships are trump everything in the workplace, despite the fact that we think it's our work. We think, all these other things, the products we do. It's really how we are with each other matters so much. The power of connecting, it helps us create safety, trust, and belonging. It enables an open mind and gives us curiosity, and we reduce blame, judgment, and bias. So effective in our teams to be more resilient when we are connecting. So our connecting skills are noticing others, heartfelt listening, empathizing, choosing kindness, and speaking authentically. We're going to spend just a few minutes on heartfelt listening to talk, so give you a taste of what deep dive down resilient skill feels like. Heartfelt listening. Our tagline here is feeling a part, listen with my heart. If we're curious about it, is how can I truly understand what someone else is trying to communicate? For me, it's listening beneath the words. So I might have a team member come and tell me that they're so mad at one of their colleagues and they're not getting their work done, and we're having this conversation. I can either respond to, well, you should be doing X, Y, and Z, or I can say, I think they're really trying to communicate that they're overwhelmed, right? And kind of thinking about what they're trying to communicate underneath their words. I'm listening with my heart. And when then I can respond to that part of what's happening, wow, it sounds like you're really feeling overwhelmed. Can take all that energy down, and maybe it's not so much targeted at their colleague anymore, and we can have a conversation about what's really happening. That heartfelt listening, really important. Just think about how you know when you are listening with your heart. Often there's a resonance going on when someone's talking with me, and I have that resonance, and I know I'm not listening with my heart when it stays all up in my head and I'm just responding to the words. It's giving people the courage to walk alongside. Heartfelt listening is listening non-judgmentally, taking in what we really hear and giving space for the other person to share in a safe, open environment, right? It gives us psychological safety, which is so important in the workplace. We can give and receive feedback when we feel safe. We are able to raise issues and concerns. We can disagree with something, even if it's somebody else's, it's really important. We can ask for clarification in a non-threatening way, those difficult questions. When people are asking difficult questions, then we're actually producing the kind of work that's important, right? When they offer solutions to problems and admit errors. People don't do this in a place they don't feel safe. And if we're not having this happen in our workplace, we need to create more psychological safety, which is what these skills are all designed to do, right? Micro practice, sometimes it's as simple as putting our devices down when someone's talking to me. Sometimes it's listening openly to what they're saying without thinking about our response. And sometimes it's paying attention to what's inside. Feeling a part, listen with my heart. So group resilience, the last thing we're going to talk about here is strengthen using our collaborating skills. And there's a lot of skills we're going to talk about, actually not seeking agreements and honoring agreements. We're actually going to talk about appreciating others. Communicate what we appreciate. Sounds easy, we know how to do it, and yet we feel like maybe we just don't spend enough time doing it, right? Communicate what we appreciate, thinking about what I appreciate about others' genius, qualities, and skills. What contributions do they bring to the group? Super important, especially if we have conflict. Think about, when did you last give words of appreciation to each team member, right? Do team members regularly spend time appreciating others? This is the WD-40 of team life, of collaboration, of the workplace. Appreciation. Easy to do, and yet sometimes we just leave that can of WD-40 and we think we don't need it, right? It's also important to think about how we appreciate so others can receive it, right? And this is the 5 types of appreciating others. This is borrowed from Dr. Carrie Chapman's 5 love languages, but it's certainly appropriate in the workplace as well, right? So acts of service. It's important to help your colleagues or your team members as they want it. What does support look like to you? How can I help you? Sometimes we take over. Oh, I'm just going to do X because they don't have time. And it's not actually what they needed. Writing a report for someone who actually loves to write reports, right? Sometimes it's receiving gifts. So if we're in the place to do it, fantastic, a raise or a bonus. But sometimes just taking someone to lunch, giving them a small gift card, a flower on their desk, right? Just can give people a appreciation feel. Quality time, spending time listening to people, focus attention, spending one-on-one time in meetings. A lot of times it's words of affirmation, shout outs, and thank yous. Obviously physical touch, not at work, especially not without permission. Just a little reminder on that one. So think of an employee or colleague who annoys you, maybe a team member who's not performing in a way that you want. What about them could you appreciate? And what other ways could you increase your appreciation, right? All these things can make a huge difference. Research shows that positive emotions are more and help groups be more cooperative with less conflict. Seems like obvious, and yet we don't spend the 5 minutes that it can take to make the workplace better. If a workplace creates a culture where individuals feel appreciated and valued for their contribution, their employee engagement increases, customer satisfaction, staff turnover, everything is possible. Appreciation makes a huge difference. So our micro practices here are to think about one thing to appreciate about the person you find challenging and sharing with them. Sometimes we call that kill them with kindness, just a little phrase. Notice how your appreciation impacts you, them, and your relationship. Just try some appreciation. It makes a huge difference, right? So just to recap, How resilient managers create resilient teams. We notice our patterns. Sometimes we notice when we're responding from fear and vulnerability and see, is that being helpful or not? And can we have a different view? We have our cultural patterns. Can we maybe evolve our cultural patterns to change them and pay attention to everybody's cultural patterns? And then choosing our resilient mindsets and skills to help. Today we talked about curiosity, choice, and courage. We talked about heartfelt listening and appreciating others. We have I don't know, I think 14 others on our website to explore, and through other webinars and more training. So happy to do that. We love to do customized trainings for groups if you're interested in getting more training. Just a reminder, a resilient manager is grounded, flexible, and connected. And that's what we're trying to be. That we want to lean into our courage to be grounded, flexible, and connected so we can build the best team and most productive. The We Are Resilient approach is a conceptual framework that we can have in our heads, but hopefully we integrate into our lived experience so it's in our heart and we can share it through our hands. It involves the mindsets we talked about today, the patterns we talked about today, and then all the skills that we did a little high over on today. Lots of resources, open educational resources on our website. We have this book, Practical Skills for Resilience, and we have lots of video learning and digital downloads, all available at dovetaillearning.org. We also are going to have a great resource available August 15th. It's The Heart of Resilience, Cultivating Inner Strength for a Joyful Life. It's sort of chicken soup for the soul meets Stephen Covey's Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. This is our newest book, and we're very excited about it. So I would suggest you sign up on our website for our email newsletter. It comes out twice a month, and you'll be able to get all the information about this book around this. So we're excited about that. I'm going to send a follow-up email to all of you. Feel free to contact me with any questions or comments, and I'd love to do custom training for your group if you're interested. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A. I know I go really fast, so I will be sending the recording, as I said. I know your time is valuable. Thank you for spending it with me today, and I wish you all the resilience possible for your teams and for yourself. We know it can make such a huge difference. Take care and have a great day.